Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Dialogue. I am Taimur Shamil. Iran's Foreign Minister Javad Zarif was visiting Pakistan this week, and this was a high-level, high delegation visit to Islamabad. It is important. This visit is important, especially in the backdrop of the U.S. Elections, presidential elections, in a way that recently Javad Zarif, Iran's Foreign Minister, tweeted about having calling for the neighbors and probably hinting at the neighbors in the Gulf about having better relations in the region, and that the foreigners would leave this region and their opportunities as well. Recently, after this tweet, Javad Zarif's visit to Pakistan, we saw that, and Iran's foreign minister was, as I mentioned, on a high-level delegation on a visit. He met Prime Minister Imran Khan, Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi, and Chief of Army Staff General Bajwa. This certainly was a high-level delegation and a visit, but looking at the circumstances that are also very interesting, Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi and Foreign Minister Zarif talked about the regional security. They talked about connectivity, trade, and most interestingly about Afghanistan. Afghanistan is a concern for Pakistan and for the region, and of course for Iran as well, which we see as a major stakeholder in Afghanistan. What would be the future of Afghanistan? That is important for Pakistan and Iran. Specifically about the security situation in Afghanistan, we see that the rise of ISIS has been a major concern for Pakistan and Iran. ISIS has been specifically focused on carrying out attacks in Afghanistan as well as in Pakistan. Recently, we also saw the emergence of TTP, Jamaatul Ahrar and Hizbul Ahrar in Afghanistan. That is also a concern for Pakistan. So Pakistan's utmost efforts are to chalk out a mechanism, security mechanism, with the regional countries to ensure peace and stability. And of course, in that context, Iran is very important. For the Iranians, it is important to have regional support. After these elections in presidential elections in the United States, many people think that the JCPOA would be revived. That is a general thinking in the region. Would that happen or not? We'll be discussing about that in our show today. And if that happens, what would be the implications of reviving, let's say, JCPOA for Iran and also for the region? Also keeping in mind Iran's close relations with China. The reports are generally in the media that China would be spending in heavy funds in Iran, and we also saw recently that India got dropped out of the Chabahar railway project, from a gas field project as well. So regional dynamics are changing rapidly. In these dynamics, we'll be discussing about Pakistan-Iran relations, Afghanistan, the security situation, and overall the global order, with our special guest in the studios and our special guest who has joined us on Skype. In the studios, we have Dr. Nazir Mahmood, renowned expert on Pakistan's policy, internal politics, as well as foreign policy. Welcome to the show, Dr. Mahmood. We are also joined by Dr. Amna Mahmood, renowned senior academic, expert on international relations. On Skype, we are joined by Ambassador Asif Durrani, Pakistan's former ambassador to Iran, and a renowned senior diplomat, expert on Pakistan's foreign policy. I welcome you all. Dr. Nazir, talking about this visit specifically of Foreign Minister Zarif, how do you see this? Iran's view, first of all. Let's talk about Iran's situation, Iran's view of the world, view of its neighbors, and then about this his a visit to Pakistan, high-level delegation, a visit to Pakistan. Iran's view, how do you see it, of the world?
I think more than Iran's view, it is also Javad Zarif's personal view also. Because I regard Javad Zarif as probably one of the best foreign ministers anywhere. One of the highly qualified. He is an academic with double masters in international relations, with a PhD in international law. And he was Iranian ambassador to UN also from 2002 to 2007. So he has, he has played his role of peacemaker at least for the past 20 years in this region. So this is the positive aspect of his personality. Overall, talking about Iran's view, Iran has been sending very positive signals to Pakistan for many years now. Just to remind you, this was his 4th visit to Pakistan in the last 2 years.
Yes.
And
2.5 years, yes.
his 11th visit in 7 years. He took over as foreign minister of Iran in 2013 when President Hassan Rouhani became president. He appointed him. So, 11 visits in 7 years, this is almost every 6 months he has visited Pakistan. One of the most, I think he is one of those foreign ministers who has visited Pakistan the most. So, they have been sending positive signals to Pakistan, but there have been some issues also. Issues like, cross-border terrorism was an issue from Balochistan. This Kulbhushan Yadav issue was also there. But, and then another positive aspect was, Iran has already completed their share of the pipeline that was supposed to bring gas to Pakistan. Right. So, overall, I think this was a very opportune time, appropriate time for him to visit Pakistan. Why? For a couple of reasons. Number one, as you rightly mentioned, that in the United States, a new impending expected government, though it's not sure, but we expect that Joe Biden will be taking over in January. And we expect, and Iran also expect, that at least democratic government would be slightly better, if not highly positive, but at least it will be slightly better than Trump administration.
For Iran specifically?
For Iran, yes. Why? Because it was a democratic government under Obama in 2015 who signed that joint comprehensive plan of action. And it went on just for 2 years, and as soon as Trump took over after, not as soon as, in fact he withdrew after 2 years in 2018. But that was a major blow to Iran. Iran was expecting to be rejoined the mainstream of international politics. So here there is an opportunity. Iran looks at it as a new opening for Iran. Possibility.
Right. Dr. Amna, how do you see, do you think that there would be some sort of revival of JCPOA, and Jawad Zarif, Foreign Minister Jawad Zarif is optimistic about it, the way he managed his trip to Pakistan, generally talking about this whole situation? How do you see that?
I think that the timings of this visit reveals that there is some optimism in Iranian government and Iranian administration about what you have mentioned for reviving of nuclear deal again, and rolling back of what Mr. Trump's stance was on that, and they are expecting a better position from Joe Biden, and for that purpose they are seeking some help and some support from Pakistan, I believe. And for that purpose, I think that more optimism is not appropriate at right in time, because as we all know that till the time Mr. Biden inaugurate in office in January, what would be the policy that would be the actual policy he will reveal in his State of Union address. Mostly State of Union address is focused on domestic situation, but foreign policy points are also given. And we haven't seen any negative thing coming from Joe Biden against Iran during his election campaign. But as we number of times discussed, that it is not predictable that American president can totally reverse his policy, his predecessor's policy.
But it was easy for Trump, by the way. I mean, he scrapped JCPOA. Somehow it was easy for him, but not for the Democrats, let's say.
It took 2 years to do that. Immediately he could not do that. And same is the case with Biden, because it is not the decision of Biden, but it would be the decision of the whole American administration and Pentagon as well. And they have to see their allies' role in the region as well, especially Iran and Saudi Arabia, because they are directly involved in that, and they are having implication in Middle East of this decision to enter again and easing sanction on Iran.
So and Ambassador Durrani, talking about this whole situation at the moment, Iran's view of the world and the way dynamics are changing globally and regionally for that matter. First of all, Iran's view of JCPOA, and what's your take on this? Do you think that Democrats can reverse, they can roll back what Trump did?
I think if you go by President-elect Joe Biden's campaign, and before that, once President Trump had withdrew from the JCPOA, Joe Biden had criticized that, and then he has subsequently he has been saying that United States would come back to or restore its membership to the JCPOA, because this was a deal which was signed, and it was you can say the diplomatic way of resolving disputes. And Obama administration had gone for that, and it almost took 2 years of protracted dialogue that culminated into the signing of the JCPOA. What President Trump has done, in fact, he has pleased his constituency, both in the American Jews as well as Israel, and he has also tried to please Saudi Arabia-led Gulf states in that. And if you recall that Yemen war actually was in a haste, and Saudi Arabia thought that through this war probably the signing of JCPOA will be delayed in 2015, but Obama administration went ahead. So it was a setback to Saudis then. But now, when once President Trump withdrew from the deal, and he reimposed those secondary sanctions. Now, there were two kinds of sanctions on Iran. One are the primary sanctions, which forbade American personalities and entities to do business with Iran, which even during Obama's time, even after signing of the JCPOA, remained intact. But Obama administration lifted secondary sanctions, which are meant for non-American personalities and entities that they could do business with Iran. What President Trump has done is that he actually reimposed secondary sanctions, which means that non-American entities and personalities were also forbidden from doing business. Otherwise, they could be put under sanctions and they could be punished. So therefore, Iran has been under pressure, there's no doubt, after the imposition of secondary sanctions. And you can see its currency has almost dipped 4 times. When I left in July 2018, it was close to 11,000 Toman to a dollar. Now it is almost 32,000 Tomans to a dollar. So this you can see, and then unemployment rate has risen. So what Americans were trying, or Trump administration was trying to put a squeeze on Iran economically, and then try to go for the regime change. But they have not succeeded on that, because Iran still has, and its economy still has the resilience to bear those shocks. Yes.
Right. Very interesting. Dr. Mahmood, recently the arms embargo thing that was going on at the United Nations, that was also some sort of, Iran claimed it as a diplomatic win, because US couldn't go further with that arms embargo. Iran's relationship with China, now moving away a bit from US, Iran's relationship with China, Russia specifically, many experts are of the view that they merge in the region, China, Iran and Russia. How do you see that? And then Iran's view of the region as well.
Well, definitely Iran thinks that it was a win for them. And this was P5 plus 1. And the other, minus USA, the other powers, of course, they are also major arms sellers. And they are also more interested in selling their arms to Iran. So personally speaking, if you ask me, I am not in favor of selling and buying arms anywhere in the world. Right. So this is not good for the region. This is not good for Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran, for anybody. If you keep arming yourself, though the governments and states, they try to justify their arm purchases on various pretexts. Iran may justify it because of Saudi Arabia or other Arab countries. So definitely Iran thinks that it was their win. though I personally don't think that it is in their favor or it is anybody's favor. Now, looking at the broader scenario of how UN and other P5 countries reacted to it, in fact, they never went along easily with Trump. They did not like it, because the agreement in 2015 was signed after a long, prolonged, protracted process of negotiations. You know, each and every minor details were worked out, and it was overall, I think, very positive. If you go into the details, it was a very positive and balanced agreement, which should have continued. And regarding your question earlier also, you said that probably will Biden go back on what Trump did.
Yes.
In fact, actually, if Biden goes back to what Obama did, that is good enough. I mean, I don't expect, or Iran or anybody should not expect anything more than that. But even if they go back to 2015 situation, I think that was very.
But would that be easy, let's say, for US? Because the thing is that recently we saw Trump administration and their relationship with Israel, Israel's relationship with UAE and Kuwait and all the countries, in several countries in the Gulf. You know, if they roll back JCPOA, Iran's situation would be different. Would it be easy for US in the Israeli backdrop to do it? You know,
I think that they will be able to do it. Why? Because, you know, Republicans are famous for going headlong.
Right.
And you know, if you see, don't go to 70 years, just look at 40 years. What happened in 1980s? Reagan, Republican, going headlong into Afghanistan. In 2000s, George W. Bush going headlong into Afghan war once again. So Republicans are known for that. Democrats are slightly reserved in that. You know, again, talking about 40 years, Jimmy Carter, look at Jimmy Carter, a peacemaker, Clinton, Obama, better, I think.
Interestingly, Trump pulled out troops from Syria and Afghanistan.
Yes, the process is starting. You know, pulling out of troops, the process is started under Obama. Initially, there was surge, and then they started.
Right.
And it
So
was Republican administration which in the first place started the Afghan war. So anyway, coming back to the reaction of P5 and UN, European Union and all others, they were not happy with Trump. And I think they have also heaved a sigh of relief as Joe Biden is expected to take over.
Right.
So overall, I think there is a possibility of going back to 2015 situation, and that will be ideal for this region. And I am optimistic, because at least Joe Biden should do what Obama did.
Right, right. So this would be interesting. Dr. Amna, Iran's relationship with China specifically, that is very, very important to note and to observe. Recently, the way China has been spending a lot of funds in Iran, backing Iran in terms of infrastructure for that matter. Iran dropped India out of the Char-Bahar project. Many people see that in the China context. Iran also dropped India out of the gas exploration project, one of its gas explorations. So how do you see Iran-China relationship, and how would that play out in the Iran-US relationship, especially after this JCPOA thing?
It's very important, because you know, China's more influence in Iran, on one side that would be a sigh of relief for Pakistan, because you know they were having Char-Bahar, cooperation on Char-Bahar, and it was a challenging situation for Pakistan in the wake of Gwadar port and its importance for CPEC. On the other hand, China's presence in Iran was actually encircling Pakistan as far as geopolitics was concerned, because they were already having presence in Afghanistan, having presence in Iran, and their close relationship with each other were actually sandwiching Pakistan in between, and that may be a challenge for Pakistan as well, especially in the wake of tensions you mentioned before, Gulboshan issue and other, Dr. Nazir Saab also mentioned. I think that it is a better position, and US would be having a monitoring of that, obviously, and Joe Biden's response to go back to 2015 position would be more dependent on China-Iran right now situation, right, and their investment. You know, China is having this policy to start from soft power, and that soft power is visible now, and if it would be increased, then you know very challenging position of Iranian economy would make it more close to China, and more investment from China would lead it to more close to China, and that would be against American interest. And if they are having this close relationship with China, certainly they would be close to Pakistan as well. And if this situation, in this situation for US interest, it would be very detrimental, because Saudi Arabia is right now not in a position to serve American interests, because Mr. Trump was relying more on Israel, and he was making the Middle East a heaven for Israel, starting its relation. And in this situation, Iran was more non-compromising, and Pakistan was having in trouble. You know, we have to balance both Saudi Arabia and Iran, and Pakistan is moving cautiously, because we are American allies, still American. We are sitting in American camp, and we cannot go against, and we cannot violate the sanctions, secondary sanctions which Duranis have mentioned against Iran. We cannot bypass. So if that situation Mr. Biden take into account the Chinese-Iranian close collaboration, he will certainly review, and the outcome would be that Dr. Nazir mentioned.
Right. So this is very interesting. Mr. Durrani, 2 points primarily before we take the break, and your comment on this. First of all, Iran's policy in the Middle East, especially after Israel's diplomatic relations with the Gulf states, and since we know that Trump administration has been backing Israel in terms of moving embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, that too was a big decision, I would say. So Iran's apprehensions in the Middle East, and then Iran's relationship with China. First of all, these 2 points, how do you see them?
Well, first on Middle East, I think Iran definitely would be quite concerned after the Abraham Accords. And because now Israel is almost sitting in UAE, just across the strait, and it is just 3 to 4 hours ship voyage. They can reach to the Iranian shores. And Iran already was in competition in the region, especially with regard to Syria. And Israel thinks that Iran has tried to besiege Israel through Iraq, through Syria, Lebanon, and then also supporting Hamas. And the Saudis have been alleging Iran that Iran has created a Shia crescent, including Iraq, Syria, and then in Lebanon, supporting Amal militia, and then Hamas. Although Hamas is a Sunni organization, still for political reasons, Iran has been supporting Hamas. So these are the major factors which have been in fact, contributing to all these tensions. And of course, President Trump has succeeded in convincing UAE as well as Bahrain. And I think Saudi Arabia, for all practical purposes, they are inclined. If not formally recognizing at the moment, but I think for all practical purposes, they are now in contact with Israel. Sudan is another case. So in a way that Israel will be trying to hammer out in the Middle East and North Africa, MENA region, to have maximum recognitions. Already when you look at the OIC scenario, out of 57 OIC countries, 31 have already recognized Israel. It means majority of the countries have relationship with Israel, including Turkey, although Turkey has been criticizing this Abraham Accords. So in that respect, then tensions are bound to increase in the region between Israel as well as Iran, and of course supported by Saudi Arabia and other Gulf states. When regarding China, I think China has a very unique position in the region. China is the largest trading partner of Iran at the moment, despite all the sanctions. China has defied American sanctions. It continues to buy Iranian oil, and it is almost only the Chinese who are taking up the bulk of Iranian oil, although the overall sales of Iranian oil have plummeted from 2.7 million barrels per day to close to 800,000 barrels per day, almost one-fourth of their production. It has brought in an economic squeeze on the Iranian resources and economy. But nevertheless, China has stood by Iran. And in that scenario, when you look at Joe Biden's ascendancy, I don't see that the Americans are going to lift sanctions immediately, or for that matter, they are coming back to JCPOA. Will also be with some caveats. For instance, President Trump wanted that he could continue with the agreement if Iran agrees to discuss Iran's missile program as well as its policy about Middle East, which Iran refused. That the JCPOA it is beyond the purview of the JCPOA. Now, I think Joe Biden would also try to bring in that while we accept that yes, we are part of the JCPOA, but at the same time, they are going to hammer this point that Iran has to review its Middle East policy and then also its missile program, because its missile program is considered to be a threat to Israelis. So in that scenario, I think it is going to take a while. And then Joe Biden is famous for his you can say matter of fact and low-key approach. And he will, in fact, more rely on diplomacy than going for saber rattling. Yes.
Right. So we just talked about Iran's view of the world, Iran's relationship with China, its apprehensions in the Middle East, and its relationship with U.S. And would the new administration in the White House, expected administration in the White House, would roll back JCPOA? We are going to take a break, and after the break, we are going to discuss about Pakistan-Iran relations. How is Iran looking at Pakistan? As Dr. Nazir Mahmood just mentioned, there are some irritants, and of course they are there. But how would Pakistan and Iran address those irritants? Also, there are many opportunities for Pakistan and Iran, bilateral trade, a lot of other things. But security is a main concern for both Pakistan and Iran, and specifically in Afghanistan. US troops are withdrawing from Afghanistan, and at the moment what we see in Afghanistan is chaos to much extent. Security is a big issue. Sporadic attacks, rather very frequent attacks by ISIS in Afghanistan at several temples, Sikh temples in Kabul, maternity ward, university, colleges, ISIS attacks inside Pakistan for that matter. So that is the main concern for not just Pakistan and Iran, but also for the region. And regional countries like China and Russia, Afghanistan as well, they share this threat. The spoilers are there, regional spoilers. India is one of them. What is going to be the scenario, security scenario in the future? We're going to talk about that after this break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Foreign Minister Jawad Zarif of Iran was on his visit to Pakistan, and here he met Prime Minister Imran Khan, Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi, and General Bajwa, Chief of Army Staff. Dr. Nazir, Pakistan-Iran relations, as you mentioned earlier, the probably irritants have been there, and both countries need to work on those irritants. But generally, there is no major conflict or issue or anything like that. We need to improve our relations. First of all, how do you think that Pakistan and Iran can address the security issue along the Pakistan-Iran border and in Afghanistan?
First of all, this issue about border between Iran and Pakistan, there have been issues. We talked about Gulbhushan Yadav and all. So if there is some activity going on in Iran by India, that should be stopped immediately, and Iran should take it seriously. And I think Iran has now distanced itself from India. Why? Because as Dr. Saab mentioned, India has started its honeymoon with the US, knowing fully well that Pakistan served American interest in this region for 70 years, and at most crucial moments, America didn't help Pakistan. be it 1965 war, 1971 war. In fact, US has been instrumental in imposing wars on us in 80s and 2000s. So first, what I think Pakistan should be doing, Pakistan should respond positively to Iran, number one. Number two, Pakistan, just like China, has refused to oblige United States in terms of sanctions. Pakistan should also, sooner or later, Pakistan needs to decide that Pakistan, Iran and China and Afghanistan, these are countries which will remain in this region. As Jawad Sharif also mentioned, in that many words, actually he said, that these are the countries, America is an outsider. Though America probably is not an outsider because American presence has been there in this region for 70 years. But ultimately, if you look at it, the future of this region belongs to us.
So it's better regional cooperation.
Regional
primarily.
cooperation is much better. And what are the irritants now? One irritant, as we discussed, is perhaps this Indian activity against Pakistan from Iran that needs to stop. Secondly, from Pakistan's side, I think Taliban have also become an irritant now. Why? Why do I say that? Though Pakistan has been very positive about Taliban, facilitating Taliban.
Facilitating primarily peace over there, and they visited Pakistan, they visited Iran as well, and China for that matter.
But sooner or later, we also need to decide that the worldview that Taliban keep, it does not fit in the 21st century somehow. Even if as soon as they come to power or they have share in power, they will try to drag Afghanistan back to medieval ages. This we need to realize, and there will be fallout on Pakistan. So probably for Pakistan, better option is to try to normalize relations with Iran, with the Afghan government,
Right.
with China, and try to keep a balance between Pakistan's relations with China or America. What Trump's policy was? Trump's policy was exclusionist policy, that you distance yourself from CPEC and you once again join United States. Now that is no more an option for Pakistan. Pakistan needs to create a balance, and if America further pushes Pakistan into distancing itself from China or Iran, I don't think that we need to buy that option anymore.
So better primarily, Dr. Amna, what I can make of Dr. Nazir's talk is that better regional cooperation, and the region has to decide what happens in the region. We have to keep it here. What is your take on this?
Yeah, I think that Mr. Zarif already mentioned that neighbor first policy, and Iranian neighbor first policy is primarily focused on China and Pakistan. Afghanistan is included in that, but Afghanistan is still in not a position to help Iran. Rather, it has been an irritant sometime between Pakistan and Iran as well, because they were supporting rival forces in Afghanistan, and now they should decide this matter as well, that we should cooperate to bring peace in Afghanistan. That would be instrumental to bring peace in the region.
Right.
Because China is having stakes in this region in the form of CPEC, and now its investment in Iran and BRI project,
and probably in Afghanistan in future.
Obviously. And Afghanistan would be the gateway to enter into Central Asian state, and that would be greater regional cooperation, prospects for greater regional cooperation. At the same time, Pakistan has to create a balance between its relations with Saudi Arabia that is uncompromising for Pakistan as far as our history of relationship is concerned and present scenario. At the same time, Pakistan cannot avoid regional power at the doorstep, have sharing border, and we have a close historical linkage with Iran as well. So Pakistan is a little fixed position, but at the same time we can use this opportunity to, and Pakistan number of times offers mediation to both states to have better position. And in that case, if Iran and Saudi Arabia would be having some sort of reconciliation or at least some understanding of the realities, that would be again helpful for the Muslim nations to survive, have independent foreign policy in Middle East. So I think Pakistan is trying and playing on all dimensions. But Mr. Qureshi gave the statement that was very encouraging.
Right.
And Pakistan can offer mediation between US and Iran as well. And but I think that is expected by Dr. Zarif as well, and his talks reveals that.
Right. And Mr. Durrani, looking at the potential of the region, it is huge. connectivity potential. I mean, a drive from Islamabad to Kabul and then to Termez and these countries, Uzbekistan, can do wonders for Afghanistan, Pakistan and Iran and for the region for that matter. But the spoilers would not want that. Spoilers like ISIS for that matter, TTP, Jamaat-ul Ahrar, Hizbul Ahrar, these are the terrorist organizations that are still operating in Afghanistan. India is playing, that we know, it is playing a negative role in Afghanistan, backing, financing these terrorist organizations. How do you think that the region can join hands in fighting these spoilers and terrorist organizations and then tapping the true potential of the region?
Well, Taimur, let me first clarify something regarding so-called this cross-border terrorism between Iran and Pakistan.
Right.
I think we have to be clear that on the border we have divided tribes which have easement rights that they can travel 60 kilometers to each side of the border. And then when Iran has been complaining about, say, abduction or some incident taking place in Iran and Balochistan, those were actually because that the people on both sides could travel. Same was true about Iranians, BLA and BRA people. They were taking shelter in Iranian territory. So this is something, but at the same time, for the first time in our history, Pakistan has deployed its troops along the Iranian border on Iran's request. And now Iran acknowledges that there's a marked change, marked difference as far as the situation along the border is concerned. And it is quite normal now. And so there's a substantive difference as far as security situation is concerned.
Right.
But regarding Afghanistan, yes, definitely, connectivity is very important. But for that, peace in Afghanistan is a prerequisite. As you mentioned, that the spoilers could, may try to, sabotage this whole project. But I think once the major stakeholders, they are on the same page, then it would be difficult for the spoilers to sabotage peace in Afghanistan or stability in Afghanistan. It will take a while in Afghanistan to bring back stability in that country. It will also take a while for the spoilers to be neutralized. But I think the vibes are quite positive, and it is going to address in this whole situation in a holistic manner. United States is also, they want to withdraw because of their, partly because of the war fatigue of, it is the longest war of American history. At the same time, they are going to save close to $50 billion per annum because they think that it's a wasteful expenditure in Afghanistan. Same is the case with regard to Iran and in the neighborhood. When you talk about Taliban, so now they are the major stakeholder. That is why that Americans had to hold a dialogue with them, and then they had to reach with so-called this peace agreement with them. So it is important that we should understand the dynamics which are into play in bringing stability to Afghanistan. Yes.
Right. Ambassador Durrani, thank you for joining us. Pleasure having you on the show. Thank you for your time. Dr. Nazir, thank you for joining us. Thank you for your time. Dr. Amna, thank you for joining us.
Welcome.
That is all from today's dialogue. See you next time. Khuda Hafiz.